O ultimato cosmico, imagine waking up one morning to find massive alien ships blocking out the sun. That's exactly what happened to humanity 3 years ago when the Galactic Coalition arrived at Earth with a simple message: surrender in 72 hours or face complete annihilation. They had conquered over 400 worlds using this exact same strategy: show overwhelming force, give a short deadline, and watch civilizations crumble under the pressure. It had never failed them before. The aliens looked at our small blue planet and saw just another easy victory. They calculated our military strength, analyzed our technology, and determined that Earth would fall faster than most worlds they had. Conquered? After all, we were just a single planet species that hadn't even reached the stars yet. How could we possibly stand against an empire that spanned half the galaxy? But there was one thing the Galactic Coalition didn't account for when they made their calculations. One variable that their advanced computers and strategic algorithms completely missed. They had never encountered a species quite like humans before. Sure, they had faced desperate civilizations that fought back initially, but those always surrendered once they realized the hopelessness of their situation. What they didn't understand was that humans have this strange quality. We get more stubborn the more impossible things become. When faced with certain death, most species choose survival through submission. Humans, we choose to make the enemy work for every inch. The Coalition expected their standard 3-day conquest. Instead, they got the longest, most brutal war in their imperial history. A war that would change not just Earth's fate, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. This is the story of how humanity was supposed to fall in days, but instead held the line for years. It's the story of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when the stakes couldn't be higher. It's about that uniquely human trait that our enemies couldn't comprehend until it was too late. Our absolute refusal to give up, even when logic says we should. The aliens came expecting a quick victory parade. What they got instead was a lesson in human determination that would echo across the stars for generations. Today I'm going to tell you exactly how a species that couldn't even travel between planets managed to bring the mighty Galactic Coalition to their knees. O dia da invasão, quando tudo começou. The morning of March 15th started like any other day for most people on Earth. Coffee brewing, kids getting ready for school, the usual morning rush hour traffic jams. Then every satellite dish, radio tower, and communication system on the planet started screaming the same message simultaneously. It wasn't coming from any government or broadcasting station. It was coming from above. The Galactic Coalition's message was broadcast in every human language at once, a technological feat that should have been impossible. The voice was cold, mechanical, translated by alien computers that had studied our communications for months before making contact. Admiral Vex Kral, Supreme Commander of the Coalition's 8th Fleet, delivered the ultimatum himself. His words were simple and direct. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender unconditionally or face immediate extermination. No negotiations, no mercy, no second chances. As the message played, people around the world looked up to see them. Massive ships, each one larger than entire cities, hanging motionless in Earth's atmosphere. There were hundreds of them, positioned over every major population center on the planet. The ships didn't just block out the sun. They seemed to swallow light itself, their dark hulls absorbing everything and reflecting nothing back. Scientists would later estimate that just one of those vessels carried more firepower than every nuclear weapon Earth had ever built, combined. The Coalition had brought over 300 of them. The math was terrifyingly simple. Earth's entire military consisted of roughly 20 million active personnel. The enemy fleet carried over 2 billion soldiers from dozens of different warrior species, each one bred and trained for conquest. Our most advanced fighter jets were propeller planes compared to their technology. Our strongest tanks were toys next to their war machines. Every military analyst who ran the numbers came to the same conclusion. Resistance was not just futile, it was mathematically impossible. World leaders held emergency meetings, trying to find some diplomatic solution, some way to buy time or negotiate terms. But the Coalition had made their position clear: surrender completely or watch your entire species burn. There would be no middle ground, no compromise, no mercy for those who dared to resist their empire. As the 72-hour countdown began, humanity faced the darkest moment in its entire history. Some prepared for surrender, others prepared for the end of everything, but a few prepared for something else entirely: war. Faisiuca primeiros dias, a resistência inesperada. When the coalition's deadline expired and Earth's governments refused to surrender, the aliens expected their usual swift victory. Their battle plans called for complete planetary conquest within 6 hours of commencing hostilities. They had done this dance hundreds of times before, across dozens of worlds. Drop the shock troops, eliminate military resistance, secure population centers, and move on to the next target. Simple, efficient, and brutally effective. But from the very first engagement, something went wrong with their perfect plan. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was piloting an outdated F-22 Raptor when the first wave of alien fighters descended on Edwards Air Force Base. His aircraft was 40 years old, his missiles were designed to fight other human pilots, and by every logical calculation, he should have been space dust within seconds. Instead, Morrison managed something that broke every tactical model the coalition had ever developed. He won. Not just survived, he actually shot down 3 enemy fighters before they even realized what was happening. How did obsolete human technology defeat superior alien engineering? The answer was simple but devastating to the coalition's assumptions. Human pilots didn't fight by the rules. Where alien pilots followed precise tactical formations and predictable attack patterns, Morrison flew like he was completely insane. He pulled maneuvers that should have killed him, ignored protocols that should have been sacred, and somehow turned his aircraft into a weapon the enemy couldn't predict or counter. This scene repeated itself thousands of times across the planet in those first chaotic hours. In the South China Sea, Captain Liu Wei used his ancient destroyer to ram a coalition landing ship, taking out an entire battalion of shock troops with a vessel that was supposed to be scrap metal. In Brazil, Sergeant Tobi Faria Santos held off an armored division for 6 hours, using nothing but improvised explosives and a deep understanding of jungle warfare. Each of these small victories should have been impossible according to coalition tactical computers, but they kept happening. The aliens had conquered species that were stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than humans. What they had never faced before was a species that specialized in being unpredictable, adaptable, and absolutely relentless. Every time the coalition thought they understood human tactics, soldiers like Morrison and Santos would do something completely different. By the end of the first week, what should have been a victory celebration for the aliens had turned into a nightmare of endless small-scale battles against an enemy that refused to fight fair, refused to surrender, and somehow kept winning fights they should have lost. Adaptation e evolução. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a 3-day war, the coalition faced a problem they had never encountered before in their centuries of conquest. The humans weren't just refusing to die, they were getting better at killing aliens. Dr. Emily Foster had been a mechanical engineering professor at MIT before the invasion. Now she was humanity's leading expert in reverse engineering alien technology, working 18-hour days in underground bunkers to turn captured enemy weapons against their former owners. Her breakthrough came when she realized that coalition energy weapons were designed with built-in safety protocols to prevent overheating. Foster simply removed those protocols. The result was weapons that could fire twice as fast and hit 3 times harder than their original specifications. Sure, they had a tendency to explode after extended use, but that just meant human soldiers learned to treat every weapon like a disposable tool rather than a precision instrument. This adaptation philosophy spread to every aspect of human resistance. When coalition jamming systems blocked traditional communications, ham radio operators like Bob Chen emerged as the backbone of Earth's military network, using modified equipment that aliens couldn't even detect, let alone jam. When alien armor proved resistant to conventional weapons, welders and mechanics started building improvised weapons that could punch through energy shields using nothing but scrap metal and industrial equipment. The most shocking adaptation came from an unexpected source: civilian gamers. 16-year-old Marcus Thompson had spent years playing real-time strategy games, and when the military gave him access to drone control systems, he began coordinating swarm attacks that overwhelmed alien defenses through pure chaos rather than tactical precision. Thompson would send hundreds of cheap improvised drones against single targets, using patterns that made no strategic sense, but somehow worked because the enemy's sophisticated defensive systems couldn't process that level of controlled randomness. By the fourth week of fighting, coalition commanders were sending increasingly frantic reports to their superiors. The humans weren't just adapting to alien tactics, they were evolving new forms of warfare faster than the coalition could counter them. Every captured alien weapon became a blueprint for better human weapons. Every failed attack became a lesson in how to succeed next time. The species that was supposed to surrender in hours was learning to fight a galactic empire and winning more battles every single day. Meses de resistencia. O preço da liberdade. 6 months into the war that was never supposed to happen, the true cost of human resistance became clear. Cities lay in ruins, millions were dead, and entire regions of Earth looked like lunar landscapes after months of orbital bombardment. The coalition had grown frustrated with their inability to achieve quick victory, and their response was to escalate the violence to levels that should have broken any civilized species. But humans had learned something important during those months of constant warfare. Civilization was a luxury they could afford to lose temporarily if it meant keeping their freedom permanently. When the aliens destroyed major cities, survivors didn't surrender. They moved underground and kept fighting. When coalition forces targeted military bases, mechanics and engineers rebuilt weapons factories in abandoned shopping malls and subway tunnels. When the enemy tried to starve Earth into submission by destroying agricultural centers, urban farmers turned every rooftop and basement into food production facilities. The resistance had evolved from a military operation into something much more dangerous, a way of life. People like Ana Rodriguez exemplified this transformation. Before the war, she had been a kindergarten teacher in Phoenix. After the coalition glassed her city, she became one of Earth's most effective guerrilla commanders, leading raids that captured enough alien equipment to supply 3 different resistance cells. Rodriguez operated out of the ruins of her old school, teaching children how to identify alien patrol patterns in the morning and how to build improvised weapons in the afternoon. Her motto became legendary among resistance fighters: "We teach the future how to stay free." But the price of this resistance was measured in more than just destroyed buildings and lost lives. Humanity was changing in fundamental ways. Children, who should have been learning mathematics, were learning how to spot alien infiltration tactics. Scientists who should have been curing diseases were designing increasingly creative ways to kill coalition soldiers. Artists who should have been creating beauty were crafting propaganda that kept resistance morale high during the darkest moments. By the 8th month of fighting, coalition psychologists had developed a new classification for Earth's population: combat adaptation syndrome. Unlike other conquered species that eventually broke under sustained pressure, humans seemed to get more dangerous the longer the war continued. Every month of fighting created more skilled soldiers, more innovative tactics, and more determination to never surrender. The aliens had expected to break humanity's will to fight. Instead, they had forged it into something harder than any metal in their empire. 2 years after the coalition's 72-hour deadline expired, Admiral Vexkral faced a situation that no previous fleet commander in the Empire's history had ever encountered. Not only was the enemy still fighting, but they were winning. The species that was supposed to surrender in days had somehow managed to capture and hold 3 coalition outposts, destroy over 60% of the invasion fleet, and most impossibly of all, they had begun launching attacks on coalition territory outside Earth's solar system. The turning point came when Captain Elena Vasquez managed to capture an intact coalition command ship during the Battle of Luna Station. While her boarding party was supposed to be a suicide mission designed to gather intelligence, Vasquez had other plans. Instead of downloading enemy data and escaping, she decided to steal the entire ship. What should have been impossible became merely improbable when human engineers figured out how to operate alien technology through trial and error rather than proper training. Within 6 months, Vasquez was leading raids on coalition supply lines using their own vessels against them. The psychological impact on enemy forces was devastating. Coalition soldiers who had been trained to expect easy victories against primitive species suddenly found themselves being outmaneuvered by humans using superior alien technology better than the aliens themselves. But the real game-changer came from an unexpected source. Not all species in the coalition were there by choice. Many had been conquered centuries ago and forced to serve their former enemies. When they saw humans successfully resisting the same empire that had crushed their own civilizations, old rebellions began stirring across dozens of worlds. Commander Zekthor of the Hegemony Defense Force had watched his own species surrender to the coalition 300 years ago. When he received orders to help crush the human rebellion, he made a choice that changed galactic history. Instead of attacking Earth, he turned his weapons on coalition forces and declared his fleet's independence. Within months, the human resistance had become the center of the largest galactic rebellion in recorded history. Species that had served the coalition for centuries were suddenly remembering what freedom looked like, and they wanted it back. The war that was supposed to end human independence had somehow sparked the collapse of an empire that had ruled half the galaxy. Admiral Vex Kral's final report to Coalition High Command was just 3 words: "We have failed." The humans hadn't just survived their ultimatum. They had turned it into the beginning of the end for the entire galactic coalition. 3 years after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's skies, the Galactic Coalition formally requested a ceasefire, not a human surrender, a ceasefire as equals. The empire that had conquered 400 worlds in less than a millennium had been fought to a standstill by a single species that hadn't even mastered interstellar travel when the war began. The formal ceremony took place aboard the same command ship that Admiral Vex Kral had used to deliver his original ultimatum. This time, the message was very different. The coalition's surrender was unconditional. Earth would remain independent. Human territorial claims would be recognized, and the Empire would pay reparations for the damage caused during their failed invasion. But the real victory wasn't written in treaty documents. It was written in the fundamental change that had occurred across the galaxy. Dozens of previously conquered species had followed humanity's example and declared their independence. The coalition's empire was crumbling as world after world remembered that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Captain Morrison, the F-22 pilot, who had won humanity's first impossible victory, was promoted to admiral and placed in command of Earth's new space fleet, built primarily from captured coalition vessels. Dr. Foster became head of the Solar Defense Initiative, developing technologies that made Earth one of the most heavily fortified systems in known space. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The species that other civilizations had dismissed as primitive and weak had become legendary. Human tactical manuals were studied in military academies across dozens of star systems. Human resistance strategies became the blueprint for independence movements everywhere. The word human had become synonymous with indomitable in 17 different alien languages. Children on worlds hundreds of light years from Earth grew up hearing stories about the species that refused to surrender, even when surrender was the logical choice. The coalition had intended to make an example of Earth, to show the galaxy what happened to species that defied their empire. They succeeded, but not in the way they planned. Instead of demonstrating the futility of resistance, they had proven that no empire was too powerful to fall, no odds were too overwhelming to fight, and no species was too small to make a difference. Earth didn't just survive the coalition's ultimatum. It had transformed defeat into the greatest victory for freedom the galaxy had ever seen. So what is it that makes humans so uniquely stubborn in the face of impossible odds? After 3 years of studying human resistance patterns, even former coalition strategists have struggled to understand what they call the Terran paradox. The tendency for humans to fight harder the more hopeless their situation becomes. The answer isn't found in our technology, our tactics, or our weapons. It's found in something much more fundamental to who we are as a species: Humans have this strange relationship with the concept of inevitability. When other species see certain defeat, they calculate the logical response and surrender to minimize casualties. When humans see certain defeat, we get angry. Not just angry, we get creative, adaptive, and absolutely determined to prove that nothing is actually inevitable until it's over. This isn't just stubbornness, it's something deeper. It's the same trait that drove our ancestors to cross oceans in wooden boats, to climb mountains that killed everyone who tried before them, and to keep trying to fly even after hundreds of failed attempts. Humans don't accept limitations as permanent features of reality. We see them as problems to solve. When the Galactic Coalition told us that resistance was futile, they were speaking to a species that had spent millennia making the impossible routine. We turned deserts into gardens, tamed electricity, split atoms, and reached for the stars. Being told something was impossible wasn't a reason to give up. It was just another engineering challenge to overcome. But there's something else that made our resistance successful that goes beyond individual human traits. It's what happened when 8 billion humans decided to work together toward a single goal. Every previous species the Coalition had conquered was divided by tribal conflicts, political disagreements, and social hierarchies that made unified resistance impossible. Earth's governments had their share of conflicts before the invasion, but when alien ships appeared in our skies, something remarkable happened. The differences between nations, religions, and cultures didn't disappear. They became irrelevant compared to the difference between human and alien. For the first time, in recorded history, our entire species had a common enemy and a common goal. The war that was supposed to destroy humanity instead revealed what we could accomplish when we stopped fighting each other and started fighting for each other. Today, as Earth rebuilds and expands into the galaxy as a free and independent species, we carry with us the knowledge of what we learned during those 3 years of war. We learned that no challenge is truly insurmountable if you're willing to pay the price to overcome it. We learned that adaptation and creativity can defeat superior technology and overwhelming force. Most importantly, we learned that the thing that makes humans truly dangerous isn't our weapons or our tactics. It's our absolute refusal to accept defeat as the final answer to any question. That's the lesson that echoes across the galaxy now, inspiring species everywhere to remember that freedom is always worth fighting for, no matter how impossible victory might seem. The Coalition came to Earth expecting to add one more world to their empire. Instead, they discovered why humans have always believed that the only impossible things are the ones you stop trying to achieve.